Okay. Ready to make this happen?
Let's do it.
Hey, Nate.
Actually, quick swig of water.
Oh, I'll reset on that. What's it? Hey, Nate.
Hey.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
And happy Friday to you, the dear listeners. That was pretty good.
That was good, yeah.
That was really good.
That was great.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the What You Don't Hear podcast. This is a 15-minute Friday where myself and a returning guest sit down one more time to talk about a specific subject or topic, all in the hopes of sending you into your weekend, your upcoming week, with some positive, actionable, or thought-provoking advice and opinion. And joining me one more time for a 15-minute Friday, Nate Winkelmes back on the show. Dude, welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
Like I said at the beginning, happy Friday,
Happy
dude.
Friday. I just have to say, the Deathcore What You Don't Hear podcast shirt.
Thank you.
That's, man, if that's not in the merch store by the time this drops, I'm
Hey,
gonna be...
you know, if you also think it should be in the merch store, listeners
It
or
should
viewers can at
Yes,
least see it.
should be
Hey,
there.
let me know. Drop a comment. Slide into the DMs. Let me know that you want to buy a Deathcore logo. What You Don't Hear. I'm pretty proud of this.
You should be.
I gotta say, I'm pretty proud of
It's
this.
wonderful.
Well, dude, as much as I would love to spend the 15 minutes talking about this shirt,
We'll save the plug for the end.
We'll save it for the end. I'm stoked you're back.
I'm stoked I'm
and
back too.
I think that this topic is going to be one that like hits both of us like pretty deeply, right?
think so,
and I'm pretty excited to kind of dig into it. So without any further ado, I'm going to kick us off here. I'm going to get us started. 15 minutes on the clock. So the topic of this 15-minute Friday is the idea of imposter syndrome. The dreaded, ultra powerful, honestly, imposter syndrome. And there's so many different ways that we can take this of comparison and social media and feeling like you don't fit in and trying something and maybe it not working the way you want. Like, where would you, do you want to kick this one off? Do you have something you kind of want to dive into here? Because there's so many different directions we can go.
I will start off by saying I didn't graduate from college, and that's okay. If you didn't graduate from college, you're still valid. That's a good rule number one. That's the first thing to say.
I didn't even go, so
there you go. See, and we're fine. No, I think it's a very important topic for one. It's something that I've definitely struggled with in the past. I think that as somebody who, I guess to use music as an example, as somebody who never really received much formal training in, we'll say, like music production, and I still don't have a lot of formal training. I'm trying my best to learn about those things, but as somebody who didn't learn those things, say formally in like a school setting, I think I struggled a lot with feelings of, oh man, like I'm missing something, or there's something I'm still doing wrong. I'm not doing this right. I think I just got caught up a lot in that, and I think it has to do a lot with self-image too, and in comparison to how you look at others, especially the people you're close to in your life. So it's kind of a vicious cycle in a way, but. I know a lot of people have had a similar experience. I don't know what yours has been like.
But I think it's obviously like I don't even know if it's an elephant in the room that's like, oh, we have to like ignore it because it's something everybody knows.
Yeah.
It's like it's expedited by social media.
For sure. Oh, 100%.
Like 100%, you see all these highlights of all these things that everyone else is doing. And even if it's even remotely similar to something that you're involved in, you're immediately going to play the comparison game.
Yep.
You're immediately going to look at that and be like, why don't I have that? And I don't deserve this and blah, blah, blah. And like, dude, there are so many things that I will beat myself up over for no reason. And like, to be honest, like I try and have a pretty balanced relationship with social media.
Yeah.
Like I really don't get caught up in it that often. I definitely use it. Right? I do all this branded stuff and all this content and all these different things. Like I for sure use it and play the game, but I try to not let it play me that much, right? Because I've had that conversation with so many people where they're like, oh, I hate what I see on my feeds and I follow everybody and I'm like, well, you can kind of control that a little bit, right? And that's a whole other conversation. But for me, the biggest thing when that imposter syndrome is creeping in, I try to, and literally I have made the decision sometimes to like unfollow or mute certain things in my feed because I know that it negatively impacts me and it makes that imposter syndrome and that comparison raise.
Yeah.
So sometimes
100%.
you just have to make that decision of, okay, like maybe I don't want to see that in my feed.
Yeah.
And you have to find, like, I think that's almost one of the first steps now to imposter syndrome is figuring out a healthier relationship with social media.
Yeah, 100%.
Because you're going to see everything that everybody's accomplishing when you know what maybe you failed at that day, right? So then you're going to feel like, well, they're doing the thing and I'm not, so I don't fit in and blah, blah, blah. And I know for me, like, again, like so much of what I look at is like, and I just compare myself in stupid ways where like I sit in, you know, a huge facet of my life is the horror genre.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
I love it. I love kind of being looked at as like the scary movie guy.
You're like the go-to horror guy. If I ever have a question about any type of horror related or wrestling, you're my guy.
Also that. Yes.
Quick side note, I watched Hellraiser for the first time.
Really? Okay. It's a weird one, right?
It's weird, but I enjoyed it.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Well, so I love that, right? Like I love when I can be identified as in fun ways. It's something like that people feel like, oh, I want his opinion on something, or I want to hear like his referral for a movie. Like I love that. I enjoy having those conversations. And it's not because I want to be looked at as just like badass, oh, he knows all.
Right.
It's more so just like that is a thing that I'm passionate about, and I love when I get to experience that with other people. So where I'm going with this is like when I see other people, you know, like I follow a lot of, you know, horror related, you know, writers and all this sort of stuff all over social media. And whenever I see them do something really cool and a lot of people love it, or they're on this show or whatever, I immediately self-defeat for some reason. And I'm like, you're not as cool as you think you are. You know, you don't belong in the horror genre. You're not like, you know, I see like, oh, this director makes a dope movie that gets attention on the internet or whatever. And maybe one that I make doesn't, and I immediately like I'm an imposter. Yeah, I shouldn't be here. Right. I shouldn't be doing these things and shouldn't be trying to. And it's just out of enjoyment. It's not that I need people to look at me as like the horror guru and it's like, oh, everything he says is amazing. But it's like it's just out of the enjoyment of I love having those conversations with people. But I will immediately be like, you're not good enough to have those conversations with people. You're not good. What's your opinion about a movie matter that much? Like, what's your short film matter that much compared to somebody else's? Right. Like, and I will always play the comparison game. And like, there's so many things like, I'll just throw this out there for the sake of the conversation. Like, I want so badly to make a sit down talk show sort of conversation or / like kind of documentary series all about the horror genre where I sit and I talk with other horror lovers and we just talk about it. Yeah. It's a complete ripoff of Eli Roth's History of Horror. It's a series where he just sits and he talks with obviously other famous people in the horror genre, but I'm like, I want to talk to just anybody about it. So that was a long-winded explanation of an example of an idea that I have, but I continuously prevent myself from even attempting it because I'm like, why do I need to have a series where I talk to more people? Yeah. You know what I mean? I immediately downplay it where I'm like, nope, the imposter syndrome kicks in and I'm like, I'm nobody in the horror genre. I'm nobody in the movie world. I'm nobody in the entertainment world. Why should I even attempt that? Because I'm not on that level or I'm not, you know what I mean? And again, I could give you 100 examples. Yeah. But, you know, on the horror topic, it's like that's one thing where I always have that inner battle. Yeah. Where I'm just like, nope, you shouldn't do it. And you don't deserve it because you're not already at that level to then do it. So then people love it and people think, you know, it's whatever, even though I would get so much enjoyment out of it. Yeah, absolutely. Like, does any of that ramble make any sort of sense?
No, it makes total sense. And yeah, I agree with you. I can relate to that in a lot of ways. I think that the thing that came to me from everything that you were just saying is that to frame it as a question, for me, imposter syndrome kind of comes down to asking myself this question, which is, what if this is as good as I can be? Because if you really stop and think about it, I think a lot of where that is rooted is in this idea that just because you're not something now doesn't mean that you can't be in the future, right? So maybe it's a response to protect ourselves from kind of that ego-shattering realization that we're not as good as that person. That doesn't mean we can't be, but we're just not right this second. So rather than focusing on like I'm going to keep getting better every day and every day and every day, you kind of you get sucked into the wrong side of it, and it's a fickle thing, man. Just it'll be too late before you realize that you're kind of have fallen into this cycle of just bad self-talk, I guess.
When that's funny. That's actually a past episode.
Yeah,
of 15 Minute Fridays we did is better self-talk, right? Which of course it proves like, hey, we're back. We're talking about the same thing, a year later.
Still
or whatever.
Extremely applicable.
Yes, it's going to be a never-ending cycle. But what I was about to say is like when you can learn how to kind of control it, because like even though I just gave you that big open-ended example of like, oh, I want to do a horror show, but I'm not good enough to do it. Like, it doesn't mean that it's not on my to-do list.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I still haven't tried to practically figure out like how I could do it. Who would I have on the show? Like who's within reach? How would I contact them? Like,
it doesn't mean that in 15 years it might not. It might. What I'm trying to say is it could be in 15 years from now could be one of the biggest shows in horror. You have literally zero idea,
and you don't know if you don't try.
Right, and your understanding of it now has nothing to do with what it could become at some other time.
Yeah, so. Which honestly, even hearing you say that, I feel like just
yeah.
Open the floodgates in my mind.
It does, because it gives you permission to just work on it without feeling like you have to do it.
You're not supposed to know everything first. Step one.
You don't. Right. Every idea doesn't come to light, you know?
Yeah, so. Yeah. You do have to give yourself time to
work. Yeah, part
of
creativity for me is like building something up and destroying it and then starting again.
Yeah.
You know, with what I've learned. And I think that people don't always have to see that process, you know?
Right.
In between, you know, your favorite artists' albums, I'm sure there's hundreds of things that have never seen the light of day, not because they're not great, but because those were just stepping stones to get to where they needed to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you also don't see all of those stepping stones either. You don't see, because so then again, it's the comparison game of like, oh, would they have something that I don't? I'm an imposter. I shouldn't be here. Like, and I probably feel that way too much about too many things. Yeah. You know, even this show, I'm like, you know, there's sometimes like literally the concept of a 15-minute Friday is to share these just conversations and maybe make somebody think or feel something, or hopefully share some advice that makes them think or feel a different way. Yeah. And man, there are so many times where I'm like, do I deserve to have that platform? Yeah. Like, should I really be doing a podcast where I think I'm, you know, helping people or whatever, even though that's the hope, that's the goal, that's whatever. And I'm not ever going to sit here and pretend like I have all the answers. But that almost is a perfect example of imposter syndrome, because there's so many times I'm like, what am I really like? What do I have to say that's so important on a podcast that I want, even though it's I hope there's something important, and it's like I'm not even leading with like the ego of like, no, I know it is. It's
just like, because it's potentially been said before doesn't mean that it's not important either. You know? Yeah. There's a lot to be said for taking the same information and delivering it to people in a way that makes sense to them. So. I say that to compliment your show. I think you absolutely deserve to have the platform you have, you know? So,
yeah. Oh, thank you.
And I know that you know that, but in those times that you forget, you gotta timestamp this part of the episode.
Yes. Okay. I would just clip this. Whenever I'm like, should I really do a podcast? What do you really know? I'm just gonna play that.
Play me on loop.
Yes, exactly. And play you complimenting the What You Don't Hear shirt. So I'm like, merch.
There you go.
Which, by the way, I love this. What is that? Silk shirt?
This is fake silk. Yeah.
Fake silk.
Yep.
Okay. The closing 5 minutes of this episode is just gonna be back to the clothing talk. Yeah. So honestly, for the last handful of minutes here. If, you know, realistically, like we're sitting here and I just told you all these struggles that I have with imposter syndrome. And again, this is a topic that deserves probably an hour's worth of a conversation, not just 15 minutes. We scratched the surface. We have barely opened this can of worms at all. We've just kind of tossed out a bunch of examples of how we felt it. But, you know, if I was somebody who was sitting down across from you and was like, hey, dude, Nate, I'm not expecting you to have the perfect answers, but in your experience with this whole imposter syndrome idea, like, I just can't get past it. I can't let myself chase goals or dreams or even get accomplished in something because I just don't feel like I belong. I'm comparing myself to everybody.
Yeah.
If somebody laid it out for you like that in the last few minutes of this, what is it that you would share that person or somebody listening right now who is dealing with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think there's two parts to that. For one, I mean, in the moment, the best thing that you can relay to somebody is that, you know, there's common ground there. They're not the only people to have felt that way. So yeah, if you're feeling that way, that's probably actually good, because that you're making progress. That's what that means. If you're not feeling that way, then you're just so stagnant. Then that nothing feels wrong, because nothing is exciting you, good or bad. You know, fight or flight, so to speak. So, anyways, not to try to make some crazy analogy out of it, but yeah, I guess the best, most practical advice would be to kind of flip the question back. I guess I would before I answered it, I would say, well, have you ever had a friend that was in a similar situation? Because usually the advice you give them is going to help you too, and that's something that I, again, going back to self-talk, try to implement as much as I can, is this idea of talking to yourself as you would talk to somebody else, you know? So yeah, not to flip the question back onto you, but I think that's one interesting talking point to remember, is that giving somebody perspective is really sometimes what they need. They don't necessarily need advice. They know what they need to do. They just need you to lead them there. So if you relate to any of that right now, then just do what you told your friend to do the time that they felt like that. You know, I know it sounds like a kindergartner when I say that, but I mean, it kind of is that simple sometimes. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think about that all the time.
Yeah,
I'm like,
man.
now hold on. Now, if somebody else was talking to me about this, I'm sure I would get this super
you
energetic,
get this
awesome
surge
answer.
Of like, no, you listen to me. I'm gonna set you straight, right?
Yeah.
But when it's yourself, you're like, you fucking piece of shit.
And it's so weird, right? Because again, you feel like an imposter. But you never want anyone else to feel like that. So you're always like, I have every bit of advice or whatever that I could give to you, all these encouraging thoughts.
I know.
Yeah, but when it's yourself, that's 100% right. You're always like, there's no way. But it's just like you said, perspective, offering somebody that perspective. So offering yourself that perspective.
Yeah.
Try and step out of yourself for a second. Look at whether it's writing things down, whether it's making a pros, cons, like whether it's writing out the steps to your goal, whatever it is. Like, that was great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you.
Well, okay. That's 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
We hit our 15 minutes.
Sure
So, Nate, as always, if anybody wants to find you around the internet, where can they find you, your music, all the things you do?
Yeah. I'm mainly on Instagram at Nathan Winkelmes. I do participate sometimes in TikTok, some other channels, but those always will end up back on Instagram too. So check me out at Nathan Winkelmes. It's where I share most of my own personal music and my awesome cat and dog as well. Sophie
Love it.
And George.
There it is. So follow him at Nathan Winkelmes. You can follow me at Who's Ross Tyson. And of course, most importantly, follow the show at WYDH Pod. Toss all the follows, the likes, the subscribes, all that sort of stuff to help me honestly feel like less of an imposter, folks. Maybe that's
right.
how we can wrap. No, we can't wrap it up on a negative thing. Guys, hope you enjoyed that episode. Nate, this was a blast.
Look for the link to the shirt in the description.
Yes, merch will be up sometime in the near future.
Right. He's doing a fake silk version too.
Exactly. That'll be just for you.
Yeah, for me.